Thank you. We are taping the meeting tonight so that we can show it, but we post it on the website. So if you have friends or other family members who wanted to make it and couldn't, they'll be able to watch the meeting from there. I'm Catherine Ayer. I'm the PA president this year. And I'm going to take 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting just to put in a plug for the PA. We're starting our recruiting process for next year. So if you have volunteered at an event in the past and you'd like to step into a leadership role, maybe be a co-chair at an event, let us know. You can email me or anybody else on the PA. The last year's co-chairs will be reaching out to their volunteers. The vice presidents will be reaching out to the people who've been at their events. We welcome your involvement. We want more people to participate. We're also looking for shadow members for almost every position on the PA Executive Committee, and what that means is that you would come to the PA Executive Committee meetings so that you find out what happens and what we do at those and kind of the background to running a series of events. But there's not really any commitment this coming school year beyond that, beyond coming to those meetings. It's a learning year for you. You have somebody who's in the role, who's doing the work, who's training you to take over the following year. So that's a great way to just kind of, if you've done a couple of events and you want to step up a little more, we can do that. Looking for a president in particular. So if you've done a few events and you've had some leadership roles here and you want to step up, it's a really fun job. One of the things that we're all trying to talk about is why we said yes to volunteering. I have 2 kids here now, a junior, Felix, who's operating the camera, and Veronica, who's a freshman. I have a son who graduated in 2016 as well. And all of the people that I know from Lick are people I met from volunteering. I worked at all the admissions open houses. If you have kids who are freshmen, sophomore, juniors, you probably saw me in the cafeteria at some point. It's a great way to get to know people. And unless you volunteer and show up at events, you're not going to know your kids' friends' parents. You're not going to know your kids' friends. It's really a great way to stay in tune with what's happening in the school and what the school is doing in terms of initiatives and things that we're moving forward, the things that Eric will talk about in a little bit at the meeting here. So thank you again for coming out tonight. It was, I know, short notice, sorry. One of the downfalls is that, I didn't have a play-by-play and I forgot to put in the save the date in December. So thank you all for making time on short notice to come out tonight. I think that's all that I have to say. And so I'm going to turn the meeting over to Eric for the state of the school.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here. I love the sort of the intimate group we have, so it really is meant to be an interchange. Any questions that you have, please just fire away. I do want to recognize some board members who are here as well. That's Laura Witter and Jack Chin and Steve Gutman. So thank you for the board for being here, and they can also chime in their various areas of expertise, not to put you on the spot. So I have a bit of what we're going to kind of go over some really high-level key performance indicators. This is our opportunity to brag a little bit because the school is actually doing incredibly well in what you would use to measure independent school health, right? So we're a very, very healthy school. But when you dig deeper into the things in our strategic plan, what's really exciting is all the work that's going in to try to make the program and the experience for all the students as good as rich as possible. I'll give you a little update on the building and the capital campaign, and then I have some statistics from our perception and satisfaction study that I think are really useful. And I just want to mention that a lot of what I'll be talking tonight has come out of our self-study, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And there's 3 copies of this that will live in the library for parents who really have nothing to do and they would like to come, and the print is really accessible. But it's actually a really interesting report. We don't post it online simply because we don't want accidental dissemination into the universe of the report. But we welcome anybody who wants to review it and read it. It's actually, I think, pretty interesting to read a self-study for a school. So does that sound good? Any questions? Great. we'll just dive in. So, just to start with some finances for the school. The school's in very, very healthy financial shape. And what you'll see over the years is the school has purposely budgeted a little bit higher revenue than expenses in order to slowly build up our reserves at the school. So 7 years ago, the school did not have reserve funds. And for a school that's as old as Lick-Wilmerding High School, it's really important that you do have, sort of money in the bank in a way, right? For different things that come along. One example is this is a beautiful building. It was built 20 years ago, 25 years ago. 20 years ago. It had some interesting water absorption issues, also known as leaks. We call them leaks. And so we had to spend a chunk of money last year redoing the stucco on this side. So you want to have these reserve funds in your budget. And so what you'll see is just a really healthy budgeting process for the school. That's you don't want to see a big demarcation between these two things. They should be pretty even, but it's good to have a little bit of revenue there. And I'll talk to you about where a lot of that revenue came from is from fundraising. So I'll show you that we have sort of beat our mark a few years going, so that's really exciting. What's really important also is that you have a healthy admission funnel and that people want to be at your school. And does anybody have a 8th grader applying this year? Okay, well, just close your ears for a second. So we actually broke our record this year for a number of applications. Again, it's always a mixed bag, right? Because it's a lot of volume, but there continues to be a lot of amazing interest in the school. What is really, I think, interesting here, so we're up here this year. Sorry, somewhere up there. But what's really, what you'll see is we've started to accept fewer students because we went to a one-to-one admission policy because our yields have gone way up, if that makes sense. So we had too many kids saying yes to us, so we had to accept fewer kids, and then when somebody said no, then we went to our waiting pool and we pulled in that way. So that started in 2016, so you'll see the yield is getting really small. See, and down here, we accepted more kids, and does that make sense? So again, a really great sign of health. Our enrollment continues to grow, and we will be at 513 next year. So we'll bring in 132 freshmen. We have 129 this year, but we will also be filling in 10th and 11th grade spots through attrition. So in the past, Lick didn't do that. We chose not to bring in. Very rarely did we bring a student in the 10th or 11th grade, and we actually are starting to take applications for transfer students now because we want to realize our potential with the new building, and I can talk more about that. Yeah.
And what is the license? What's the connection?
So we have a conditional use permit for 650 students. We are not going to have 650. So we will get to 550 in about 4 years from now. Yeah.
I've noticed that expenses have been climbing pretty steadily. Is this the main primary reason for that?
Well, healthcare is your main reason. That's what drives expenses the most aggressively, in that you are looking at usually 10 to 20% increase in your healthcare costs each year. And that's almost 20% of our personnel cost. So, but yes, we did over-enroll kids right in here, and we added sections. And this is what, so we said, well, if we're adding sections, then let's bring more kids in to make sure we're running those sections at their most efficient pace, which is 16 to 17 kids. Yeah. So kind of a combination. So this is probably something that parents are super interested in. What you'll see is the rate of tuition increase. It's annualized over these years. It's about 4.5%, and the going theory is you want to keep your tuition increase 1 to 2 percentage points above inflation, right? And that's in part to cover that when you have a very human resource heavy industry such as teaching and as schools, your healthcare costs cover the difference between inflation and what you need to raise your tuition by. Does that make sense? Laura, do you want to say any more about that?
I think the other thing that's a big consideration is, and this would be beyond Lick, but just teacher salaries, which is a huge driver of our expenses. And so really keeping pace and trying to, I think we're grappling every year and still grapple with keeping teacher salaries, attractive. We start to see, some teachers leave because of cost of living in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And so that's really, to your question on what's really driving the expense side of it, it is a lot on salaries and then benefits associated with that.
Yeah, thank you. So the board has not voted yet on the tuition increase for next year, but I don't know, it will probably be really close to what it normally is, right about there. So you'll find out. So I just want to give you a little sense, though, that Lick continues to be such a bargain. So I just, honestly, there's not a lot that separates these schools, but it is important to see that, there is something that does separate us. We feel comfortable being somewhere in this area of the benchmark tuition group, but we really want our salaries to be up in here, right? And so that creates a few challenges every now and then, but I think we're doing a really good job of doing both. So, this is the tuition increase from last year to this school year, not this school year to next school year. So that's that. This is a really interesting slide, and this came out of, as we're doing our self-study, we mapped also the number of years of teaching experience. And if you look at these two groups, pretty much almost 72% of our faculty has 16 or more years. That's really exciting and great. It also means that you are going to start seeing retirements. And this is true of the teaching industry as a whole. And so and we have been very shy or reticent to hire teachers without at least 5 years of experience. We are going to be pushed into needing to do a little bit more of that. And so one of the things, and we'll talk about as a school, is how do we mentor new teachers? How do we recruit and retain really talented teachers, right? How do we capture the knowledge that comes with these many years and help younger teachers benefit from the experience of their older peers? So this is a really interesting cultural phenomenon going on in schools, and it may be going on, I think it's going on in industry as a whole. The other thing about, and you've read probably a lot of the information about millennials and their loyalty to institutions and their desire to feel as though they're moving in their career. Teaching is such a fascinating profession in that you enter the classroom with the same responsibility as you leave the classroom with after 21 years. It's the classroom, right? And so how do you find ways for teachers to constantly feel like they're growing, where they do feel like they have more responsibility, where they're gaining other skills, leadership skills, administrative skills? So how we do school is going to need to shift a little bit. We've already started providing some of these opportunities. I think, we have teacher teams now. So all the teachers that teach freshman English meet as a team. We give a small stipend to have a team leader. And the team leader is not necessarily your most experienced person. It could be your newest person, right? But it's the person who organizes those meetings, makes sure that there's an agenda, that people are aligning what they're doing. So we're trying to give, and that's just one small example. We're really looking at how we create opportunity for younger teachers to feel like they're really blossoming.
Can I ask,
Yeah.
what's the attrition rate?
For teachers, it's very low. It's about 1%, 2%. So we usually lose 1 or 2 teachers. However, I will say last year, 3 teachers left and they all moved away. They went to Austin and to Vermont, which is not a city, but and then one is traveling around the world for a year. So, you know, we have been somewhat insulated by the housing crisis in that a third of our faculty live in the East Bay, which is, we're so lucky to have BART right here. The East Bay is becoming prohibitively expensive. So I think we are going to start seeing, especially people who want to start families. I think it's really hard to do that. So we have some work to do there.
Aaron,
Yeah.
how do you assess teachers? How much weight do the student assessments have, and would you ever consider parental input?
So students do student experience surveys, so they don't rate teachers, they rate their own experience in the classroom. They're not pedagogical experts, but they are experts in their own experience. And then for new teachers, they go through 2 years of what we call the critical reflection process in their first 2 years, and then after that it's every 4 years. We are looking, and it comes later in the slide, but we're looking at creating a more little less of a self-reflective process for new teachers in their first 2 years, a little bit more directive. So that's another change that has to happen when you have a less veteran group of people, right? So we are sort of playing with some of those notions. Yeah. So this has been amazing, and thanks to everybody in this room who helps with this. So you can see over the last 7 years, we've more than doubled the annual fund results for the school. And, you know, people say, well, how'd you do that? And honestly, we just started asking people. And Lila, you can weigh in on this, right?
I'll leave that one to you.
Right. But what's really been so exciting is that people are so eager to support this school. They really do see it as a different independent school and one well-deserving of their philanthropic dollars, because it really is trying to do something that maybe some other schools aren't doing through just trying to create as much economic access as possible. We're still an independent school. 62% of our kids are still, families are still paying the full tuition, but 38% are not, and that is about twice what a lot of other independent schools are doing. And as a result, I really do feel like the people are really stepping up and realizing we have to preserve this, right? Because it's not easy to preserve. So this has been amazing. So thank you to everybody here who helped with that. Any questions about that? All right, well, some of this will sound familiar if you've read through our updates of the strategic plan over the past, and there's a lot of text in these slides, so I'm not going to read them all. The presentation's available, it'll go along with the recording, so feel free to read them at your own leisure. There's also an update of the plan that was written 2 years ago that you're welcome to go and read, that's on the plan. But we're in our last year, sort of last year and a half of the strategic plan that we currently are on. And I think we've just made tremendous progress, and it really has driven the initiatives at the school. And now we're leaning into what will come afterwards, right? So the first one was about habits of mind, and we really have embraced those to create a shared vocabulary in the school around imagine, inquire, collaborate, persist, and reflect. And we've tried very, very hard not to over-communicate these so that kids become cynical about them. It's a really fine line. It's a very fine line. And there is a little bit, I think, of cynicism out there. And yet, I hear students quote them to me, sometimes, like, well, Mr. Tupple, I'm persisting. And I'm like, that's great. Like, that's what we want you to do, So I think there's a playfulness that goes along with sort of feeling overexposed to these skills, but at the same time, I do think there's a buy-in, I really do. And we assess how often these are taught and how students feel about them in their student experience surveys. So we are getting data right from the kids that's anonymous and widespread. So it's not just me with anecdotes. But you know, one thing in a independent school that's really hard to do because teachers teach their passions is how do you create connections between all of your classrooms? And this has allowed us to do that. It's allowed teachers from different disciplines to talk about the same skill, right? Which is really, really useful for kids. It makes learning much deeper across the board. So I don't know if anybody have a graduate here. Habits of mind, have they come out to play at all in your lives, in their lives? I mean, I imagine they're really good at these things. I don't know. You know, they're good at
Well,
collaborating.
they call it that, but they're
Yeah.
good at it.
Yeah, they may not call it that, which is okay. We keep working on curricular alignment. Some departments are doing much better than others at that, but we are not giving up. That is when teachers teach the same course, they should be teaching the same material and giving the same tests and giving the same homework. And some teachers have really embraced that, and some departments have, and some aren't, and for various reasons. But we're going to keep forging ahead with our alignment goals. We belong to the 21st Century Assessment Working Group, which is a group of 5 schools. It's Castanea, Punahou, Garrison Forest School, the Francis Parker in Chicago, and Lick. And it's a really neat group of schools where we're sharing alternative assessment practices. So, you know, we have to, California is fascinating. We have to give grades because of the UC, right? We have no choice. Urban school, which finally actually now has grades, for years they didn't give grades, but they actually did give grades, just nobody knew about it. No, the kids knew, and they could ask what they were. It was kind of funky. Steve went to Urban.
Yeah, no, we weren't allowed to know.
Oh, you weren't allowed to know. Yeah. So, because you have to report a grade for the UC, right? So we are going to stick with grades at Lick-Wilmerding High School. However, we really want to talk about what those grades mean, right? How do we articulate what is an A in this discipline or in this class? The pressure for kids with grades is tremendous. There is no question. They drive each other. The colleges drive it, and it's real. It is real, and it can make teaching really, really hard because no teacher wants to not reward a kid for their hard work, but if they haven't conquered or understood the context completely, do they get that grade? So it's really complicated. So as a result, what we are really trying to do is build assessments that show learning over a period of time, right? Not the learning. So if a student comes in being an expert at something, that doesn't mean, and they end exactly in the same place, they actually haven't accomplished that much, right? And so we're really trying to push this idea that we want to measure learning. That's a really hard thing to do, especially very often what you learn in your adolescence, you don't know you even learned it until you're 30. So it's really complicated. It's very complicated. But it's exciting that we're thinking about these things. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about the issue of grade inflation or
Yeah.
comparative grades. It seems like everybody does really well here, and I wonder, do you have a sense of how Lick compares to how grades are given at other schools, and if there's been over time any sort of grade inflation, how does that help or not help being able to distinguish between who's doing well or not, and how well do the colleges understand what Lick's,
Right.
So it's a bunch of questions at once.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. And, people say, do you think there's grade inflation? I'm like, I'm actually not sure. I think we've articulated better our expectations for what we want from students, and they were able to meet those expectations. These are incredibly hardworking, really motivated kids. So I think that's part of it. and I can talk about my own experience as an English teacher. When I finally started using rubrics for essays, like it used to be like, oh, he doesn't like me, that's why I'm like, no, it's about your writing. And then, and then when they knew like what the characteristics were, we would develop the rubrics together so they owned it and all that. All of a sudden their grades started doing really well. I'm like, oh, I got to make these rubrics harder, right? Because, but it's this idea that kids, when they know what they need to do, they'll do really well for the most part. So I think that's part of why we do have high grades. We do look at grades in all the classrooms and all the departments, and we make sure that they're not completely, that there's no real outliers of how teachers are assessing kids. As far as colleges, we do have really good relationships with our college reps, and they get to know the school, and that's the best way. When you show that you're only taking about 13% of your applicants, that tells a college a lot of the competitiveness of the community. So there are those things. Our students are doing really well in the college acceptance world. They really are. So, yeah.
So what are other, like the 5 schools that you say get together to look at different ways of assessing performance, or what are, so aside from the self-reflections and traditional grades, what are other ways that you guys are learning, other methodologies or learning from each other?
Yeah, so one thing we're really interested in pursuing, and we don't know exactly when. So what are some other interesting alternative assessments that are being used out there? We would like to move to a portfolio assessment system where, and there's so many different ways to do portfolios, but an example, and I'm not saying we're doing this, but an example would be that a student at the end of each semester would choose their 3 best pieces of work, and you could even say, like, we want one humanities work, one, science, or, whatever. There's so many different ways you can construct this. And then over the course of their 4 years, they get to see the progression of their learning. If you think about how a student writes in freshman year and then how they end up in senior year, it's amazing, right? Most of it's because their brains have actually developed and they can access their thoughts, but it's amazing how much progress they make. That would be so important for us as a school to formalize. Some kids may save their papers, other kids may not. If you have a boy, I bet you they didn't save them. But as a school, we should be showing a student and their parents how the student has progressed through their 4 years of learning. So that's something we're really thinking of implementing. That will be our leaning into the next strategic plan. I really think we'll eventually get there. And also online portfolios now make it so easy, right? So, has anybody been out of school where they use portfolios? Yeah.
Design.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. I think they're great.
Students are so proud of them.
They are. And then you do a portfolio defense. So you have your seniors, one of their culminating projects could be a defense of their portfolio, where they have to talk about what it is that what skills they've developed, how they've grown as a learner, as a thinker, so it could be really useful. Just wanted, we continue to develop courses. We're trying to create more integrated curriculum. We're trying to create courses that pull from different disciplines, because really that's the way we think in the world. It's the way we think in our jobs. Again, the UC is somewhat problematic in that every course has to be designated under a discipline, so they don't have an integrated discipline designation, right? So and we're working with them, but I don't know. But, for instance, so one way we got around it is this semester, we offered 2 distinct courses, one in the English department on genocide and one in the history department. Kids did not have to take both, but if they happened to have been in both, they got a really interesting experience. But they also, kids in those classes could have conversations with each other about what they're learning. So that was one sort of way we did it. We did this course last year, which was an English history class, and you had to be enrolled in both. And the problem is, we had 12 kids who were willing to make that commitment. That's 2 75-minute classes that you're giving up for that one class. And when you're a senior in particular, it's your one time that you get to explore a little bit. So Not sure if that works. Obviously, applied math to the real world, that is just a more integrated way of thinking. We now have environmental science, which I think is an integrated curriculum. So we're just really trying to keep pushing online that juniors and seniors can take. Anybody's child done a blended course? Yeah, they get decent reviews. It's a different way of learning. It's hard for our kids to separate that connection to teachers, but it's been okay?
Oh, she really liked it. Yeah.
Oh, she really liked it. Some kids love it because they have a free period during the day, right? It's not free. You still have to do your work. Nothing's free in life. I think the Center for Civic Engagement, from my perspective, is the area of the school where we have made the most huge strides from where it started 7 years ago. Okay. Some of you were not here. We had a program called Jealous Block, which was a week where the whole school was out doing community service. Do you remember it? Really great projects in some cases and really inconsistent in others. And so by having this 4-year public purpose requirement, we really are trying to weave it into the life of the school. We have a great Peer Connect program, student leadership training. We're actually about to do student leadership training 201 with kids. We have these 2 great mentor groups. We have an amazing revamped philanthropy initiative class. I think we have 18 students enrolled in it this year. It's where the students learn about philanthropy, they learn about nonprofit governance and finances. They go out and volunteer in different nonprofits, and then they are a grant-making board, and they grant $10,000 to a nonprofit. So it's an endowed class. The money's coming from a parent in the past who endowed it for that purpose. We started this tech arts program for middle school students, and what's really neat is we're partnering with the Boys and Girls Club in this neighborhood, and we identify 3 kids a summer that come and do the program the week for no charge. The OMI, the Outer Mission Ingleside, is one of the least well-served neighborhoods in San Francisco for youth. I think it has 1 clubhouse out here. It just doesn't have a lot of resources. So any way the school can sort of help, just make the environment around the school as healthy and education-oriented as possible, I think is really great. We have interns. We actually have interns in a lot of offices now, which is fun. So I don't know, please visit the website of the Center for Civic Engagement. It really is impressive. And it really is becoming a student hub for all of their volunteer work, for opportunities of internships, summer work, summer travel. It's kind of like a student union, if you remember that from college. It's a neat thing. That was just goal 1. There's only 15 goals. There's only 4. I'll go a little bit faster. Well, we needed to plan a connected campus, and I won't read all this, but basically we did a great facility master plan. We discovered a lot about our campus. One of the things we discovered was that the old building had some significant seismic challenges. They were not life safety challenges, but they thought that if we were to occupy during a major event, that we may not be able to reoccupy that building. So we would be without a school building. So we looked into retrofitting it. Super expensive, but actually a lot less than building a new building. But no, we just took the opportunity to do really needed improvement to the campus. And that building it was wonderful, but it had seen its lifespan. It was built for 250 students. We're at 500. It was just also a very static building. It didn't have any capacity to create a more fluid way for students and teachers to interact and for students to interact, and that's really what the world is about now. So it's just quite amazing what we're going to accomplish over there. And the other thing that's really important is that it will allow us to grow the school a little bit to go to 550, which creates a better economy of scale So it will help us control tuition costs a little bit. And it will allow us to bring in approximately 25 more flexible tuition students. So out of those 60 more students, 20 to 25 will be flex. And so the percentage won't change, but the number of students will change. And so again, it's just part of our mission that we think, and we certainly have the applications to do it.
Can I ask, is this work that's being done fully CapEx, or are you borrowing for it?
We are borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're borrowing a lot, but in a very responsible way. So I can pause and talk a little bit about the finances if you'd like. So so the goal of the building, I have it at the end of the budget. The building's going to cost about $45 million. I know, like, that's insane, right? Right.
Project
Yeah.
45.
It's a really big building, though. It's like 53,000 square feet. So it's a big building. And San Francisco and, well, whatever. Okay, you get it. It's expensive. We are trying to raise 30 of that and borrow the rest, borrow 15. We have modeled borrowing 22 and raising about 24. And so we feel really responsible, and that we can do that just fine. Without jeopardizing any program, without jeopardizing flex, and it just feels it's the right thing to do. It's really hard for a school this size to raise that kind of capital. Yeah. So, Sandy, do you want to, or Jack, or you finance folks back there? Do you want to add anything?
I'm on the finance committee and have watched this for 3 years, and the school was really fortunate when it went to lock in its debt. They got I think an exceptional deal in rate and flexibility. And with that said, the more successful we can be raising capital towards the building, the more we have to do all the things the school wants to do more of. But the project is in pretty good shape from a finance perspective, and that's due to the hard work of a lot of people before I got into it.
Can we say the rate?
What's this?
Can we say the rate?
Sure. I mean, yeah.
So we got 3% money, right, which is really cheap. Yeah. So there'll be a hot tub at the head of school. As like some people say, you can't afford not to borrow the money.
The other thing that I've heard you say before that I think is really valuable about that is the fact that it also allows you to spread out the burden, if you will, or the ownership of that building over several generations of families of students. That it's not just the people who are here at the moment paying for the building, but it allows it to be part of the budget and the tuition and the expenses and fundraising for families for a number of years. And that has some benefits when you hope that this building has as much longevity as the previous building, which was, 50 years?
60, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's called intergenerational equity, and you do want to build a piece of that into any building project and not just have the current parents have to, and alumni bear the full costs. We are building a really amazingly green building. It will be built to LEED Platinum standards, but we're not going for the LEED certification. There's a significant cost in doing that, and we decided we don't need the plaque to tell us that we've done this, but we're really excited. What we are doing is we're going to go for pedal recognition with the Living Building Challenge, and if you don't know about that, I really urge you to look at LBC. Well, Steve actually brought it to our attention, and I've learned so much, and it is really a beautiful program. You don't get recognition until a year after you've lived in your building. So it really is about how your building lives. Whereas LEED is all front-loaded, right? It's all about how you built. This is about how does the building function. And it's also, so we're going for the equity pedal and the beauty pedal. And I know it sounds like so, I don't know. Sounds ethereal, doesn't it? But what the equity pedal is around how accessible is your building? for all different types of people. How does it fit into your community? How does the community get to use the building? It really is about how is the building part of society, right? The beauty pedal is really about there is some aesthetic, but it really is more about the quality of life that you have by being in the building. So how is the air? How is the light? You know, how is the space? All of that. So it's a really amazing program. And we would love to get the energy pedal too. It requires a significant amount of battery backup, but there's some changes in that, so we're still looking at that. But so it'll be a completely solar powered building because it's always sunny here on Ocean. Yeah. Steve, is there anything you want to add to that?
You did a great job. Does the master plan address the streets and connection to the neighborhoods, the fire station, safety, pedestrians?
So the Balboa Park master plan does address all of that. Our master plan stayed within the four walls of the campus. Yeah. But we work really closely. I go to all the Balboa Park Station meetings, and they actually hold a lot of them here. Christy is on the redevelopment. Christy Godinez was on the Balboa Park redevelopment board because they're thinking, you know, the reservoir over there. They're thinking of building stuff. Housing, hopefully. And a baseball field for Lick-Wilmerding High School. So we're, the other thing, we're trying to work across the board on being a more sustainable school. This building, I think, will really catapult the education of students. It's meant to be a building that teaches. We're putting a lot of monitoring devices into the systems that students can download the data onto their computers. We're not going to have one of those screens in the lobby that tells you how much water and everything, because in my experience, people use them for about 6 months, and then they get sort of stale. But if we can integrate the data the building provides into the curriculum, that to me is a stronger teaching tool. So that's exciting. You know, we have to sustain this community. I talked about admissions, and you know, that's one of the main ways you sustain your community. Your community is making sure you have a really robust group of students that want to come here. So I showed you some of that. We're also really working on promoting what we do here, and I don't like to talk about myself very much, but we talked about being a founding member of Blend Ed. I'm on the NAIS board. I teach in the Institute for New Heads program. I've also been appointed to the National Commission on Accreditation. But then there's people all across the school that are giving conferences, that are hosting conferences here, that are a part of different boards. And it's a really vibrant community where we're very generous in sharing whatever we can with other people. And we want them to share it with us, because it's always a two-way street, right? So well, you can say the reputation and recognition of the school is very good. So hopefully you haven't told anybody your kid goes to Lick and they've looked at you like, oh, I'm so sorry. So, no, okay, so when I got the job at Lick-Wilmerding, though, I told my mom, I said, Mom, I got a new job. She goes, great, what's the school? And I said, Lick-Wilmerding. And she said, that's a horrible name for a school.
Get a new name.
I feel so bad for the children. I'm like, can't you just be happy for me? So anyway, it's a unique name. So this is really the area of the school that I would say is one of our most pressing challenges for our long-term sustainability, and that is sustaining Flex. And so we had a Flex subcommittee of the board last year that really did a great job of looking at the overall health of the program. It's actually very healthy. We have 5 quintiles of income brackets. We have an equal number of Flex students in each of those 5 quintiles. So this is a school that does not have what some schools describe as a barbell, where you have people paying full tuition and a lot of people on heavy financial aid. We have a really nice, almost straight line that shows the economic diversity that the program really is trying to promote. And we have what I believe is a really important critical mass of recipients. So note adolescent ever wants to feel like they're the only person in the room experiencing something, right? It's just antithetical to the experience of being an adolescent. So you want to create environments where people see others who are similar to them in the room, right? And that goes across all different types of identifiers. Well, economic diversity is one of those. And it's just so important to have a large group of Flex recipients at the school for so many different reasons, but we want students on Flex to feel like this is as much their school as anybody else's. And I think we do it as best we can to make that happen. But critical mass is really important, I think, with all of these initiatives. We now, taking on additional debt, we are determined that it will not influence the way we have a sizable number of Flex students. In other words, we're not taking money to service the debt out of that budget, right? And so we really, and what we're looking at most likely is doing much more targeted fundraising for flexible tuition, in particular among alumni. And so our alumni appeal this year as a test case was all around Flex, and it's gotten wonderful response. So, help a student go to the school that you loved. So that's where we really think that that's where some of that money is going to need to come from. We have a 10-year financial plan, and we are in the process of updating it even more. So the school is really disciplined at looking at our future, and that's really exciting. And we are in the middle of a capital campaign. These are all ways that you sustain your organization, right? This is, making sure that you have your admissions, you have the money you need to do the programs that you want. And we've also gotten a lot of really great foundation support of some of our initiatives. So here are just some of the grants we've gotten over the last 3 years. E.E. Ford has given us 2, one for the institutional research position, one for the blended consortium. Miranda Lux gave us money to start our robotics computer program. The Winston Foundation continues to fund flexible tuition every year. And then we got a really nice gift from the Thomas White Foundation to support the Fund for Success, which helps our lower income students who can't afford to, for instance, get educational testing if we suspect they have a learning difference. It just helps kids get to school if they don't have enough money to get here, right? So that's been really great. So we're not just asking parents.